Welcome to a very special edition of Running the Table with John and Rob on Rubber Run Sports. Today we have a great show where we talk about legendary football coach Tom Verbanic. I'm joined as always by Rob G. and Papa.
Guys, we're here today. We have Jason Eldridge from West Springfield High School, Kyle Simmons from the state champion Westfield Bulldogs, Doug Ewell from the state champion Westfield Bulldogs, and Brian Day from Riverside High School.
Thank you, Rob. Brian, we'll start with you and we'll just kind of work down the line. Tell us your first interactions with Coach Verbanic and how, up to this point.
For me, I go all the way back to my high school freshman year. When he took over the program at Fairfax, I got a chance to play football and baseball for him for 4 years. And then later on, I got the opportunity to coach with him starting in 2002 till 2012, both at Westfield and Flint Hills. So that's our relationship.
Doug?
I started back in '96. I was coaching at Lake Braddock for Francis Dahl, and our coaching staffs would meet together on Friday nights at Thursdays, and that's where our relationship started. And then when we started at Westfield 17 years ago.
Yeah, so the beginning of my coaching career in the early '90s, I joined Francis Dahl's staff at Lake Braddock. Francis Dahl went to school at UVA with Tom, so Tom would be around, or we would go to clinics and things. I would interact with him there. And then I joined his staff at Westfield when the school opened in 2000 and was there with him until he left to go to Flint Hill.
I started in 1990, just like Coach Day, as a freshman in high school, and played for him for 4 years. And then he gave me my first start in 2002 in my coaching career at Westfield High School, and subsequently coached with the conglomerate you see here, and that's how we went forward from there.
For you two guys here, you didn't play for him in high school, obviously, but you knew him a little bit before you joined his coaching staff. What was it like? That relationship when you actually did join his coaching staff? What were your first impressions of coaching with him?
Well, the first impression I had was the way he treated people. I was always impressed with the way he managed his staff, the way he made you feel, and also the same with the kids. I think Tom was before his time in the sense that I don't think you're going to have success coaching kids now the way you were coached as a kid.
No.
I think that you'd have a very hard time, and kids would not respond very well to that, especially in this area. But Tom was kind of ahead of the curve there. I mean, I don't know that I necessarily call him a player's coach, but he just had a way of dealing with kids and making them feel good about themselves. And I always like to say that Tom, they talk about players making everybody around them better. I always felt like Tom made everybody around him better.
Yeah.
Very similar to what Coach Simmons said. His demeanor, but his attention to detail. He always made us as coaches feel important. And so even though sometimes he asked us for our thoughts and opinions, and it made you feel good about it. Made you feel that you made a suggestion and it was a good thought. And even if you never used it, you still feel good about what he asked you, the question that you gave him and the thought, that process. And he was like, man, that's a good idea.
Right.
And I love the way even though like Coach Simmons said, he was wasn't sure if he was a player's coach, but I would think that he was. And the simple fact that he made you feel good, and they were excited about playing for him.
One of the things I remember as a player was how he was able to relate to kids from different backgrounds. I'm sure all of you have experienced this too. Talk about kind of what you've learned from watching him relate with kids from different backgrounds and different family situations.
One of the things that I've watched for a lot of years is his ability to, you say different backgrounds, it's not so much relating to their background, but getting every kid to buy into the team of what they're a part of. And I think that it gives everybody a place on that team. And I think that's one of those great things. I've always said about Tom that he can coach the great players. I think it's easy to coach your best players, but he can take the bottom or the kids that might not be able to help you yet and rise their game up to a level where it makes them better than every other team, and from a competition standpoint. So the depth that they get immediately rises up very quickly, and I think that's why he's had so much consistent success. But from even back in high school, I think I was able to watch him from a football perspective and then go into a baseball perspective, and he was a totally different person. And for a young sophomore, all I knew, he was always yelling at me as quarterback and angry all the time. And then I come out to these guys, and he's hugging them and doing something completely different in a coaching world. And I'm like, oh, so you're just like those guys. Right. But it wasn't until I was later in my coaching career I really understood what he was doing. Right. And it has a completely different approach for two different sports, which I thought was pretty awesome to then help me in my career to understand that.
Tom and I have had this conversation before. I can remember riding down 28 talking with him, and we both shared with each other that we were introverts. And we talked about how we might be somewhere and see somebody in a distance, and we go out of our way to not run into that person just because we don't really enjoy those interactions that much. But if you go somewhere with Tom, if you go to a playoff game or we call him the mayor, because you're going to get from point A to point B, it's going to take a long time because Tom's going to have to stop and talk to this person, and he's going to talk to this person. So for a guy who considers himself an introvert, he just has a way about himself that draws people to him, and I think that translates to his interactions with kids. He just has a way about him that kids are drawn to him, they want to come talk to him, and also I think that he develops a culture amongst his teams in which the players learn what a good guy is and that he has their best interests at heart. And so the kids among themselves know that Tom's a guy they can go to, talk to, and a guy who really cares about him.
Yeah, so my experience is a lot like Coach Day's, and I'll just carry him off what he said. I'm one of those middle-of-the-road, low-end guys that, the big thing about him was he was able to take the average player, get them to work hard, and become something that they really maybe would not have been had they just been under a normal coach. And the other thing he did, because my experience was I thought he hated me for 4 years. I mean, I really did. I was like, this guy hates my guts. And what he did was he got to know me, and he got to know what pushed me. And he got to know how do I get the best out of this guy. And Jason Eldridge's play on that situation is different than Brian Day's. Brian Day's an all-state quarterback. Jason Eldridge is not an all-state football player, but I'm going to make him an all-district football player by the time he's out of here. And he did that. And for me to see that and understand that later in life, I now apply that to my kids. Kid A can't be coached necessarily like kid B. It just depends. Some kids need to have their foot up their rear end. Some kids, you need to hug them. And he figured out, how do I get the best out of this child? And here I thought, and he knew, the way I get at me as a player is I'm going to shove my foot up his rear end, and he's going to want to prove me wrong. And that's all I worked for 4 years. And he knew that. And that's a little bit genius on his part. And so I've tried to take some of that in my own experience for that. So that's kind of what I took from his situation. The other thing he did for us as a football team is at Fairfax, you guys know this, we had some high-level guys like Coach Day, but by and large, a lot of us were like me. And we're just, these average kids walking around, and he brought this lunch pail mentality, and he would say it every day before pregame.
Blue collar.
Blue collar. And you work for what you get. And this is how I live my life now. And, it's my parents, too, that did that. But he also reinforced that, and we saw success from that. And I think that is what he brings to the table for young people. And that's the transition that you need in this element. So that for me, that's what he does.
See, for me, I look at it, and I don't disagree with all of them, but I think he made you feel like he was a part of it. Yep. When he integrated himself, he was in the weight room lifting with you. Yep. He was running prize with you on Mondays. He made you like, it's not the players and the coaching staff separated, we all in. And once the kid, so he would humble himself by making a Polish joke about himself, which made the other kids like laugh at him, and so it was okay for the coaching staff to laugh at a player because they were all in with each other.
Or the fact that he loves the Buffalo Bills.
Exactly. So he would humble himself, which made everybody else feel it's okay to be humbled. And so by him humbling himself, it allowed everybody to be humbled. So if that means being critical of somebody, they handled it a little bit better because everyone's been critical of everyone. And so I think that allowed the players to want to drive that much more. And I think that was a great experience for all of us. And I think that I look at us four here, we all coach together, and we can all pick something out of ourselves that we take from him that helps us be more successful.
Well, for Coach Day and Coach Eldridge, obviously you guys had the relationship as players. How different was it, and what was that experience like joining the staff with him as a coach as opposed to being a player for him?
So I remember one meeting, and you guys were all there, but we're sitting there, and he has this thing he does in pre-seasons where he's like, you know what, we're going to do this conditioning drill or something, and I'm going to, or circus, and I'm going to tell him it sucks. And then I'm going to pull them together, and I'm going to yell at him, and I'm going to tell him to do it again. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, hold up. So here I am as a player thinking, oh my God, we're the worst team ever. When I was a kid, we got to do this again, right? And now it's a whole scheme. It was a whole scheme to get us to do things together. So that was like eye-opening. And I looked at him, I'm like, so that's what you used to do when we were kids. So
well, to your point, my junior year, we were pretty good. We went undefeated that year, but he kicked us off the field because we were just horrible.
I remember that.
And me and a couple other guys were smart enough to know he was giving us a day off.
Come to find out, he had a tea time.
Right, right, exactly. But we went out there and we were like, okay, well, everybody else left. Well, 4 of us stayed on the field to throw, and we're going to keep working because we're here. And he came back out and then saw us on the field and just ripped us because we didn't do what he asked us to do. But we knew better that, we were trying to get work in. But I always thought that was very funny. And for us at Fairfax, I think going into the other, and I don't think he does that as much. I think he's evolved from that. But it's funny to talk about from the coaching perspective that we share.
But that's what we talk about in the
we laugh.
in doing kids.
Right.
The way you work with kids.
But it was always funny because I remember talking to him about it one time and saying, I always had a plan to give the kids a day off but he never wanted to give us a day off from working or thinking that we're getting out of work. So I think that's one of those things he tries to instill in the kids is if you looked at, you talk about integrity, I just had this conversation with somebody who runs a business who was asking me about this. And he was asking me about another player in the region who was coming out of college and he had questions about work ethic. And I said, well, if it was a Tom Verbanic kid, would you have this question? Right. Would you be calling me about this kid? And he goes, no. And I thought that was something pretty awesome to say about Coach Verbanic and who he's raising. Because even though you might not have played as much football, he still had an impact somehow in your character, who you are, and what you've become today.
Yeah, and I think if you look at Coach Dan and myself, and even these two here coming off of state titles, right? For us, I mean, when people ask me, how do you think your team's going to be this year? And I always tell them, I'll let you know in 10 years. And I think if you look back to his genealogy over time, what do his people look like now? And I mean, you're looking at 4 of them right now. I mean, we're all just grinders, you know what I mean? But we learned to grind when we were young, either as coaches or players. So that's kind of what he does for the people he mentors.
Coach Simmons, you had, I always thought it's one of the toughest jobs for a coach who's replacing a legendary coach who has so much success somewhere to come in. And now you've had that same success. Kind of talk about the pressure you felt your first year in that position, and then how gratifying it is, to win state championships in that position.
Yeah, so I think, that's a product of the culture that Tom started at Westfield, and the staff that's here right now started at Westfield, and it got the ball rolling so that, yes, when Tom left, it was a loss to the program, but he had it working at such a momentum that it was bigger than just one person. And whether it's Tom or myself or anyone else, Francis Dahl, who leaves the program's had losses through the years. I mean, not only player losses, but coach losses. But because the culture is so strong, and we're just trying not to screw it up. You know, you got the momentum, and you just want to make wise choices and make little tweaks here and there to make the program better, but you just want to keep that going. And then, you know, from a personal standpoint, you know, I had some chances along the way to maybe have left Tom and gone on to some more responsibilities elsewhere. But Tom was always interested in setting me up for success down the road. And he gave me responsibilities, and he allowed me to, you know, do things that were maybe head coach-like, that he was willing to put on my plate, that made me a better person and prepared me. And I honestly thought I was prepared when I took the head job. I had no clue.
Nope.
No clue. And I've called Tom and apologized to him for things I did to him as an assistant coach, because now being in that seat, I understand where he was and what he was experiencing. Right. And unless you do it, you just don't know. And that's the best way I can say it. But you know, he did set me up for success.
And Doug, I have a question for you on top of that. You're a state championship basketball coach at Westfields. Kind of take, and Jason, you coached a state championship girls basketball team. Kind of take some of the lessons that you learned from coaching with him or under him that you applied towards a completely different sport.
You know, that's a great question, but I think I'm a football coach that coaches basketball.
I would agree with that too. Doug, I'm right along there with you, bro.
And so, probably the biggest thing that I got from Coach Verbanic, and I think that it might have been a culture at Fairfax or a culture from other places that he had, is that, you know, multiple sport athletes are the best athletes. Yep. And we have really taken that culture at Westfield that Coach Dahl and Coach Verbanic have ingrained at Westfield, and I think Coach Simmons and I, and the Westfield community has taken it just to a different level, you know. And so, Coach, his support of other sports was really, really important. So I don't miss a football game. Coach Simmons comes to as many basketball games as he can, and that just shows unity throughout the school, right, which unifies, which encourages kids to do more. And I think that probably is one of the most important things that I really got from Coach Verbanic. Now, an unbelievable work ethic, you know, 6 a.m. meetings on Sundays and things like that, you know, and that's the same type of grind that we have with our basketball team. Probably the other thing is that I really got from Coach Verbanic was communication with your kids. Not communication with parents, communication with your players. And so what I really enjoyed was his communication with his players as a football coach. And so I've taken some of those things and tried to ingrain it in our basketball program. So we meet once every 2 weeks. We have individual meetings with our basketball players. And it just kind of helps communication and let us know where we are. Right. And so I think the communication piece that he has with his players really helped me with my basketball team.
Yeah, I mean, I'll bounce off Doug on this. I mean, I've seen Kyle at cheer competitions, and you know, I see you laughing about that, Rob. Okay, but you know, and I have 3 girls, so they love it too. But I mean, we will outreach in that perspective in order to show our support for everybody else's endeavors. You don't necessarily have to be a football or basketball guy or player of any kind to be dedicated. And then the other thing about it was in big game situations, and I learned this a little bit also from Carol Craig, who worked under Tom, you know, big games are just games. And so when my teams went into the state tournaments, they'd be all nervous sitting there, and we're at VCU, and all these people are there, and I'm being interviewed beforehand, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" And I'm like, "It's another game. You got to work like you have worked all year long, and if you continue to do that, the results that you've been seeing are continue to be the results that you will see." And honestly, we took all that from him. I mean, I remember being, and I wasn't a major piece or a big piece of this team at all, but I was a part of Coach Day's team. It was 10-0, and we entered a playoff game against South Lakes, and all of us were just in the room like, you thought we'd have to change our underwear, and he felt that, and he went in and he was like, "Dude, guys, just settle down, man. Like, you're 10-0 for a reason. You're a good team. This is a good team. You're a good team." And this is back when not everybody made the playoffs, right? Yeah. Just a few select teams, and you got to approach it like it's every other game, because that's what it is. And if you take anything more from that, you're going to lose perspective. And so that's kind of what I brought to the table, when I'm in that opportunity. And I know these two have for sure, because that's why they're wearing rings too. So, I mean, that's that's kind of what you learn from him. And the hard work and the dedication, no matter how good you are, it's got to keep going, because at some point you're going to have setbacks no matter what you're doing in life. And we've all faced that, all four of us. And every single one of us gets up and we go to the next thing, and we just try to make it happen. So,
Well, as a working relationship on his staff, what was that like? Could you go and give him opposition on something? Could you step to him and say, hey, I don't think this is working? Did you have those conversations with him as a coach on his staff?
I could always have those conversations
Yeah,
with
you
him.
definitely did.
I always felt very comfortable in voicing my opinion, even when he wouldn't listen to it. I always had something to say, but what I think, come on, Kyle, seriously. But I think what I learned as time went on, and I think you'll agree with this, as time went on in my career there at Westfield, more and more was given responsibility-wise, but more and more was earned too, in terms of his trust. And you have to have some good things. I mean, I remember the first 2 years, I probably didn't say anything on a game night as far as what we should do, and I'm listening a lot. Listening, learning from Doug, learning from Kyle, learning from Tom, everybody. But as I got more and more experience, I got a lot more comfortable. And I think the one thing he did is, and I think this is he probably talked more to us as a staff about how we practice and the instruction in terms of what we're doing versus what we're doing on Friday nights. Because by the time we get to Friday nights, the work's already done. We've already won the game or lost the game based on what we've done in the week of practice. So I think that was one thing I've always looked at as a player in both sports with football and baseball, how different they were, but how we were just more prepared. And then how that practice plan at Westfield, I think we practiced so well, which we got a lot more out of the kids. And I think our kids were more prepared. And I think I told us all from a different player from the perspective is that we want to make practice as hard as possible so the games are easy. Right. And that they were just prepared. And I think that having that level of pressure put on kids, and just getting them used to the environment, making plays all the time, not just on Friday nights, I think that's what paid a lot of dividends down into the playoff time. And then, of course, being successful breeds more success, because in the 10 years I was there, we coached two and a half extra years in playoff games, and that's a lot for those sophomores that are getting a lot more experience in practice. I think
the 3
that's
years
important.
I was there, we lost 2 regular season games, maybe 3 tops. So
I loved his ability to adapt. So our first year there, no seniors, running the wing tee, which I couldn't stand, and we were doing things. But the next year, he fully engaged in his own blocking, and he took it on to himself to learn. And it was something that I was already doing with Coach Dahl, so I was excited, like, God bless, we're getting out of the wing tee. But I loved his ability to want to learn. So his ability to want to learn, I think, encouraged us to want to learn. And so I was eager to learn more defense because, Coach Simmons and he'd be coaching the defense on the JV team, and I was coaching the defense on a JV team, offense on the JV team. We'd be going at it. And so I think it was important for me to learn some defense and for him to learn some offense. And I can remember when Coach Day came in, and he had all these great passing schemes. I'm like, man, you better learn zone blocking first, right. Because you want to sling it around, and we ain't got enough time for slinging it around, right. Okay? And so it was just unbelievable the way he wanted to learn and to adapt. Each year, you get in a public school, you're not recruiting kids, so you can't run the same system every year. You have to adapt it, and you got to be able to mold it and make it fit. And so I think his ability to be able to make things fit what we do with kids was amazing to me.
Yeah, and he's done it again. I mean, yes. Here at Flint Hill, he's making another move in that direction for what he has,
absolutely,
to use. And I think that's great coaching. I mean, that's.
Tom was always willing to listen to anybody, and he was willing to take something about what you said and find that thing that he was comfortable with and use it. The one thing he did for me that I always appreciate and didn't appreciate at the time, but when I took over as defensive coordinator, Carol Craig retired, a legend in this area, yep. Probably one of the guys that not a lot of people know about, but was an incredible.
But should know about.
He's the guy that taught me how to defend. But I made a lot of mistakes in 2005, my first year as a defensive coordinator. Same thing the second year, a little less, but made mistakes. But Tom knew how hard I was working, and he knew that the mistakes I made, I was going to learn from. And unless it was something that he just could not deal with, he let it go. You know, and instead of telling me, no, that's not going to work, or no, you can't do that, he let me make those mistakes. And I think I learned from those mistakes because I made them, I saw them, and I corrected them. Versus somebody telling you can't do something, and then in the back of your mind, you're upset because they didn't let you try something. Tom was open to allowing the people, he felt like if he gave you a job, your job was to do that job. And he wasn't going to micromanage the situation. And that is not true of all head coaches. There are a lot of head coaches that have to be, their hands have to be on everything. And Tom wasn't like that. I gave you a job, you get the job done.
See, I call that a dollism. Because I can remember when Coach Simmons and he was a defensive coordinator on a JV team at Braddock, and I was a JV offensive coordinator at Lake Braddock. And Coach Dahl would be right beside me as I was calling plays. And I would call a play, and he goes, "It ain't going to work." And I'd be like, "Why?" And he wouldn't say a word. And he'd like, "You got to figure it out." And he would make me figure it out. Right. And I think that was something very similar in those two men who are my mentors. And they truly engaged in, like, you learn. Your growth is failure. Right. You know, you learn from, and if I teach you all the time why this didn't work, then are you really growing? And
Tom would never miss a JV game, but he would stand all the way at the other end of the field because he felt like this was the time for his assistants to be in charge. And he didn't want to be, over there trying to make suggestions. He wanted them to learn how to do it without him being around.
Well, he'd still give a look.
Well, if the game got closer, he'd start inching a little closer.
He'd still look.
No question.
Good Lord.
Goodness.
You talked about his ability to adapt. I'm curious because I remember how he was. This is '96 before Facebook and Twitter and these student sections like go nuts. Like, I wonder how he felt about that. Because sometimes we stand at the games and I'm just like, dude, Verbanic would probably yank everybody out of this crowd who's doing that right now. But
he's, I think what he does it's regardless of the technology and then what kids are interested in. What he does is it's just consistency. And so the rest of that stuff is distractions, and he's just doing this, and kids buy in, and they sort of leave that, right? And he doesn't buy. This is what we're doing because he's so strong in getting kids to buy into what we're supposed to be doing here. And I still think he has those challenges like we do about trying to get kids to learn how to commit, learn how to get focused, and it's harder and harder today, like Kyle was mentioning earlier, as far as coaching kids today in their style. I think he makes, you make a big deal of whatever you make a big deal about. And he doesn't make a big deal. I think he just coaches and gets kids to work hard, and still the main thing is still the main thing. It hasn't changed. It's work hard, get results. It's do and get, I'm sure you guys are more technology oriented with your conversations, I'm sure.
A couple stories there, but Tom tells a story about when Barry Switzer was with the Dallas Cowboys, and somebody had gone to a practice, and there was a boom box blaring, and players are dancing during stretch. It looks disorganized. And somebody asked Coach Switzer about that, and Coach Switzer says everything can't be important. And Tom, that's the way Tom was. I mean, there were things that were important, and we're going to do it this way, and this is the way it's going to get done, and there are no questions about that. But everything can't be important. You just wear yourself out trying to make everything the most important thing. The most important thing is getting these kids prepared to play football, which is going to get them prepared for later in life. And that's what was important. And as far as the technology goes, I mean, he still claims he can't work his phone. So
at least it doesn't flip anymore.
Yeah.
Now
So
it's one
Probably
big.
convenient though.
Yeah, so he plays dumb about all that stuff. He can't do any of this stuff, But it's all fun.
Well, I want to go back just to digress a little bit. My experience as far as me giving feedback to him is very different from these three. So my senior year, week 1, we're playing Chantilly. Doug's going to like this since he's a Chantilly guy. And we're up 3-0 the whole game. Cedric will remember this too. And fourth quarter, we get a penalty on a punt, and that gives Chantilly life. They go down and score and beat us 7-3. So I'm fuming because I'm a safety, and I'm thinking, I just worked my tail off here, and our offense can't score 3 points. Now, lo and behold, the offensive team, which is by and large underclassmen, becomes Division I players the next year, and they win the region. And you were on this team, right? So obviously, so I'm fuming. I go into the office the next day, and I say, Coach, I played running back last year. If you need me on offense, we just scored 3 points. Let me help. And the look on his face, I just wanted to crawl and die. He said, excuse me, how about we not give up a 90-yard drive on the fourth quarter to lose the game when we've been shutting them down the whole game, huh, Mr. Leading Tackler of the game? I mean, he's doing this to me, and I'm like, but Coach, we had a penalty. He's like, I don't want to hear anything from you. Then at practice, he's got us around. He's like, so I've had some seniors come up to me, and he was talking to Jason Eldridge, talking about how they want to help on offense. I think we just need to get together. And I was mortified. So when I became an assistant under him, and I wasn't a varsity assistant, but I didn't say a word. I'll never say a word to him. In fact, we just had a camp with Kyle and with Tom, and Coach comes up to me, and he looks great. I'm like, Coach, man, you're looking great. He's like, thank you. We're going to be doing all defense this period, if that's okay with you. And it's like a Jedi mind trick he's got on me. Like, these are not the droids you're looking for. I'm like, yeah, all defense, great. And my staff's looking at me like, are you? And I'm like, just do it, okay? Don't listen. So that's kind of my experience with him. But again, he knows the buttons to push, and that's why he gets the result he does. So.
Yeah, Tom does not respect finger pointing.
No, and I learned that lesson that day.
Because he's got short hands, and he's not a big pointer himself.
Really short.
Yeah, I mean,
You can say this on camera.
I can guarantee you one thing: he can't hold more than $13 worth of chips in his hands. I can guarantee you that. So, from a baseball perspective, from BP, I swear to God, all you saw was all ball because his fingers couldn't make it around the ball when he's pitching BP. But I always give him a hard time about that. But
I tell you, the other thing that I think we forget, and another thing that he brought to the table was family first. I mean, our families were truly ingrained in our programs, and I noticed that with Coach Simmons now and my program now is that, we've got into this without kids, and now our kids are growing up and they're involved, and I see that, that was one of the things that he brought to the table a lot. It was family first, and your families were truly involved in our program.
But even as a young coach, Doug, he has kids around practice.
for us, I mean, with Tommy and Kendra, that was always something we saw. So it's kind of normal for us. And
same thing in my basketball practices there.
Right.
Well, what is the thing that you take most from him that you took into your head coaching careers?
Ooh. I think the thing that I try to do the most is the preparedness. I think that's the one thing from playing for two sports with him and seeing the different way we would prepare. I think that's the one thing that I saw. I think make the biggest impact for him in his career, and I think that's something that we all try to emulate: is being as prepared as we can. And the other thing is, and I always said this about him, is consistency. He hasn't really changed in 30 years. The game has, and the kids have a little bit, but he hasn't really changed. And I try to be the most consistent self I can be for our kids, for our program, and as a leader of a program. I try to do that, and that's a place where I struggle in trying to be that. So that's something where I try to emulate and learn a lot from. That's one thing I think Kyle and Doug have done a great job with watching them grow at Westfield, and also, but I think that's one of those two things where you guys have really achieved. Having that consistency is important as far as off seasons, for who you are as a teacher, as far as who you are in the program, to your coaches and all that. I think that's something that we all took from them that made a huge difference. Yeah.
Work ethic.
Yeah.
Yep.
That dude has first of all, I don't sleep, and he doesn't sleep, I don't think. And so work ethic. His work ethic was unbelievable. And I like to think that I try to emulate. I don't know if I can match or overcome, but try to emulate his work ethic. I don't think that in my years of coaching with him and then being a varsity coach beside him as a football and basketball thing. I never, ever thought his team was not prepared. And that's one of my goals is for our basketball team every night. We're not going to win every night, but we're going to be prepared every night. And so I think that that's something that I get from him. And, and I think it really is kind of a sign of Westfield is that it's, we're not going to be the most talented athletically every day, but we can be the best prepared and we can be the hardest working.
The list is long. I mean, I could talk for an hour about the impact he's had, but the big picture, I remember a kid who came out to play, was not an exceptional football player, but Tom found a spot for him on the extra point team. And I would bring up, Saturdays, I said, Coach, this kid's we're going to lose a football game because of this right here. And Tom would he'd listen, but, in his mind, the big picture was this kid needed a role on the team, and this was a position that he could get better at. And I'll never forget, in the offseason, that kid wrote a letter to Tom, and he shared it with me. And I realized what Tom knew that I didn't know at the time, which was the impact that we were having on this kid and what this kid might be later in life because of the role he got to play on our football team was very special. And so I tell our team, this is about football, but this is also about the type of husband you're going to be, the type of father you're going to be, the type of citizen you're going to be down the road. And that's kind of the success Jason was talking about. What are you going to be 10 years down the road? And that big picture that it's not all about football. Football is a means to get somewhere else.
If you were to judge a football program or any team program based on who's standing on the sideline that's not a player but maybe a former player, he'd win every time because he's got more kids and people coming to be part of that. And we saw that for years at Westfield. It was kids just come back to the games to be a part of it because it's special, and I think that's what kids feel, and so they want to do it. I've met so many former Fairfax players, and now their kids are going to high school and in that area, and they're wanting to play for Coach Verbanic or being around games. You just see them all the time. I think that says a lot about how people feel about Coach Verbanic and wanting to be around his program. I think that's important.
Yeah, for me, it's two things. Like I said before, it's the understanding of getting to know the individual that you're mentoring, coaching, teaching, those kinds of things. So understanding how to go about identifying what gets them to go, as he did for me. And then the other thing is I've taken some structural things from him. I do circus. Yes. Yep. And the kids hate it, and I don't care. And it's just what we're going to do. And, I love the 2-huddle process in our team segments that I learned at Westfield. We get so many more reps in. Now, you got to have the numbers for that too, of course. But, getting the structural things that I sought after has really helped, and it's helped my staff. And I have some guys on my staff that have been coaching for years. And the things that I have instructed them to do, when they look at me with the kind of a stink eye, I'm like, do it. And they do it, and then they realize how much how effective it can be, and they're like, wow, where'd you get that? And I was like, well, it's what I had to do in high school and what I learned when I first started coaching in high school. So those are the big things I've taken from it. But the work ethic thing it's invaluable, and I know we've all spoken about that. So that's just something I think that we have taken from our experience with him as part of who we are. So.
All right, guys, this has been great. Again, we're going to share this to Verbanic, so we hope that you have some stories that are a little funny, something different than him wearing those old 1970s coaches shorts that I hope he's not wearing anymore.
The fake ones with the back pocket.
We'll find that picture somewhere so you
None
can
of you
use
guys
it.
wear those, dude.
No, but I did make a photocopy of it one time, put it around Westfield.
Although I must say the shorts have gotten outrageously baggy. I mean, they got to have something in between, right?
Funny stories. For me, I think it's as a player, I think one of my funny stories, and I don't think it was very funny because I was pretty pissed, but I had a habit of sitting in the coach's office before the pregame. I just kind of like to just sit there, and I'd get the game ball and rub it up. And I had gotten into a bit of an argument with our defense coordinator in weight training, and Tom really didn't care at what point of time of the day it was. If he needed to get on you, he's going to get on you. And he threw me out of the coach's office, which pretty much pissed me off, and it was in front of all the coaches, and and it really didn't matter. He was disciplining me, and I was pissed. So we go, it's homecoming game. We go out, and on the first two possessions, we fumble the ball. We're down 14-0, and he's pissed. And I would have, this is the only time I've ever yelled at him, but he's yelling at me, and I yelled something back to him with a couple words. Yeah. And he let it go because he knew how passionate and serious I was. And I think as a coach, I think that was one of those great moments that I learned from, because I was going, oh boy, this could put me on the bench right here. And it turned out we turned the game around, and we ended up winning pretty big. But that taught me a little bit something, that he understood kids are human and competitive. And I think that's one of those things I learned over time from him, is watching how he handles certain moments. I think the funniest story I tell on Tom is my first day coaching at Westfield. He's wearing the exact same shoes he was my senior year, which was about 17 years later. And I'm looking down, and I'm going, no, Champion doesn't even make shoes anymore. And I give him a hard time. So it's one of those things. I was dead set on making sure he was dressed a little better, and when I was at Westfield, because he didn't really care about clothes. He didn't have much style. Yeah.
I'd have to say it was our first year, and we went up to play a prison. We went to a prison to play a bunch of
Victor Cullen
Academy, and he was trying to get the kids motivated about playing a prison at a prison, and it was amazing. And we got there, and the prison something had happened, and all the kids were on lockdown, and only the kids that could come out were the kids that were playing in the football game. And so it was just funny, and he made a comment like, "Woo, we got a great crowd tonight." And it was just, it just made me laugh. We brought busloads of people to that game, and we were at a jail. I'm like, who signs up to play a jail? Inmates. And it was just awesome. There were many, but that one right there is probably the best.
Yeah, that first year's got a lot of good stories. I'll tell a couple. So Westfield's fields were not ready when the first day of practice opened, so we went to Bull Run Elementary School. We line up for stretch. We're doing karaoke. 3 kids go down. Flat fall down, and we're like, oh my goodness. Second day of practice, some kid shows up late. We're in stretch lines. Tom walks up to him, he's gonna rip him a good one. Yeah. Tom comes back, he's got a smile on his face. I said, what's going on? He said, kid said the line at McDonald's was a little longer than he thought it was going to be. Our first game, and probably not many people know this, we went to Lafayette to play Lafayette. First game, Westfield history. Okay, Lafayette, a good, I don't know, what are they, 3A? 2A school. We get down there, and lightning hits. We're all, Fairfax County, we're all on the bus, right? Lafayette is out on the field warming up, looking at us on the bus like, what's going on, man? Why aren't you guys out here? Because they didn't have Fairfax County rules about lightning. Last one, Doug's talking about Victor Cullen Academy. So we show up, and our cheerleaders get off the bus, and the prison guard's like, oh, hell, you brought cheerleaders? So we play that game. Now, we are most of the staff had either come from Fairfax or Lake Braddock, 2 very successful programs. We're coaching a different level of football this first year at Westfield. And we get back from the Victor Cullen game Saturday morning, and we are all distraught. It is a mess. And we started putting these labels on the wall, like, what do we need to do to motivate these kids? Well, let's divide the bench up. We'll have a hug me bench over here. We'll have a yell at me bench here. We'll have a I just want to watch the football game here. So there were so many funny stories. And the way we handled that as a staff, with, Tom being the leader, we all wanted to quit at some point, but Tom realized that was just the beginning of something great, and these were growing pains we were going to work through, and we were going to grow from this, and then look at what Westfield is now.
Absolutely. So, real quick, I have one. My senior year, you'll remember this. A group of people, I don't know who it was, goes out on our grass field, and I don't know what chemical they use, but they spell the word poop from the 40 to the 40. And Coach would always take things and try to use them as motivators. So he calls us all together before the game. Meanwhile, we go out to the stadium and there's poop written across the field, right? And he's like, this is how bad they think of you. They don't even have the nerve to spell the right 4-letter word to call you what you really are if you don't go out and play. And so we were all like, rah! And we just wanted to like break walls down. So that was my first. The second one, I was a freshman. And we had a class that was, there. We were just a bunch of clowns, I would say, as a group. And some individuals weren't, but as a group. So we're kind of screwing around a lot. He comes out and puts us through 30 minutes of pure torture. Torture that I use today, crab walking, up and down hills. Kids were throwing up. About 5 kids walked off and quit. So we have a scrimmage the next day. We go to Braddock. Braddock comes out with kids in the numbers of 114. And I'm not kidding you. They had 114 on their jersey. We get off the bus. There are 16 of us because he had run 5 of them off. And we end up beating them by, because Braddock used their A, B, C, and D teams, right? So we end up by score beating them, and he pulls us together, and he's like, now you see, when you guys work hard, 17 of you can beat on 113 guys. So I took those 2 things. I thought those were kind of funny stories from my childhood, and it's hilarious to see how you kind of motivate today as a coach from those kinds of things. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Good. Guys, well, thank you for joining us. Coach Eldridge, Coach Simmons, Coach Jewell, Coach Day. It's been terrific. We can't wait for Verbanic to see us.
Thanks for having us.
No, it's been great.
Thank you, guys.
For Rob, I'm John. Check us out on rubberrunsports.com, and we'll see you next time.